Hey, and welcome to the Headliner Podcast. I'm your host, Nick, and I'm joined today by Oliver.
Hey, Nicholas.
Hey.
Hey.
We've got a lot of really cool stuff to talk about today.
So cool.
Yeah. Starting off with something that I know we've been excited about in the office, which is our mobile app.
That's right.
There's
There's a mobile app.
Yeah.
We're not even supposed to be talking about this, Nicholas.
Oh, really?
I heard that some of the people building it think it's like too early to be sharing it with the world, but
man.
you know what? We're going rogue. I think it's pretty cool. You can get it in the iOS and the Android Google Play stores. And it essentially just allows you to take your videos and easily share them on social media, any video you've created, and you can also create an automated workflow from the mobile app as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's exactly what you just said. Basically, we noticed how hard it is to get your videos onto Instagram from your phone.
And by noticed, we mean we've gotten thousands of emails from all of you.
Yeah. And building off of that, I mean, I wouldn't have noticed it without the emails. It was the fact that there were 1,000 that I was like, oh, yeah, this is a problem.
At least 1,000.
At least, yeah. But yeah, basically, especially if you're on an iPhone, it's a lot easier to post now. You create your videos if you're making them manually on a browser, and then you can pull up your phone, grab your export, and share directly to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever.
Yeah.
You know, you get all the likes and favorites and retweets or whatever.
That's right. So yeah, go check it out. You can search in the app stores for Headliner Video. And you just look for that little gradient with the H, and that is it. The mobile app everyone's been asking for, it's there.
Yeah, exactly. On top of that, you had something really cool that you worked on a few weeks ago that you wanted to talk about, didn't you?
Yeah, so at the end of October, as you said a few weeks ago, I published a post on Medium. It's now up to 117 podcast marketing tips from podcasters just like you. So we put the call out for tips on how to market your podcast and got tons of responses. There's a lot of overlapping responses, a lot of really similar stuff, a lot of unique things in there. And so,
but just saying all the repeated stuff and the multiple points that come up repeatedly, that's validation. That just means it's good advice.
It's good. What I was leading up to, it's good advice, is that unfortunately I couldn't pick everyone's advice because a lot of it was really similar. So I apologize to the people who sent in advice was very similar to other advice and I couldn't pick it, but hopefully I'll be able to add that into some other thing in the future. But yeah, my favorite piece of advice on the entire list, I'm going to read out now, and I put it kind of big at the top, is from Brett Johnson of the podcast Note to Future Me. He says, don't get overwhelmed by marketing tips. Every tip you read has worked for that particular person. Do what's comfortable. Do what you will do consistently. I think that's super important advice because there are 117 tips on here now. I just added a couple more this morning. I keep adding them in as they come. And so, you're not going to be able to do all this stuff, but the post is more to kind of get you started, give you some ideas if you're kind of in a rut, or just to kind of eavesdrop and see what other people are doing.
Yeah. Building off of that, actually, my favorite piece of advice, it isn't like a singular post on it. It's just like the general consensus among a ton of these. It's just the idea that if you're doing a podcast, don't necessarily change your format just to fit some other need. Don't try and appeal to everybody. If you have a podcast about something that's relatively niche, maybe just own that and just target that niche demographic,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of advice in the list here that comes right in that. There's basically, general advice number 11 from Candace Carlton of the Cubicle Revolution. Do not try to reach everyone. It will mean diluting your message and impact. Speak to one person. Observe them like crazy. They will tell their friends.
Yeah, exactly. I think another one, and I don't remember where it is, but it was basically just telling you, feel free to send your podcast out to your family and stuff. I know some people who have podcasts and they almost treat it like it's a secret.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to tell my parents because what if they think I'm just a crazy person talking into a microphone at night?
Maybe you are, but maybe you're going to get famous doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you'll be the next crazy alien conspiracy radio guy. That's kind of awesome if you ask me. So just share it with everybody. if you share it with your inner circle and they like it, they're going to be more likely to share it than some stranger on Twitter.
Right.
And from there, it's just a ripple effect of all of these people are going to share it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with Headliner. The first people trying out Headliner were friends, family,
Yeah.
people that, some podcasters we knew from just from the world of podcasting, or maybe just from the fact that I live in Brooklyn, surrounded by podcasters. But it's always the friends and family first. Like, that's where it all begins. And I think the quote you might be kind of remembering is number 9 in the general advice column from Brian Lofrumento.
There it is.
Of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. And his advice reads, people want to help you. They just need to know how they can help you. Mm-hmm. Most newer podcasters are afraid to tell their friends and family about their podcast, but those are the people who are most willing to help you out.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you're like starting out, there's just this whole idea, and this is number 6 in that general advice column by Ashley Mythen from It Can't Be That Friggin' Hard. Surprisingly, it can be in my experience, but that's just me.
Actually, it can't.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's my experience. It can't be that hard, can it?
That's usually me with everything. But she wrote in saying just to have fun, make sure you're enjoying what you're doing. And that was kind of going back to what I was saying about, just not changing your format for some greater purpose or anything, just making sure you're putting out something that you're happy with, that you can, get behind. And then people usually pick up on that just subconsciously, you know?
You just have to be yourself. I think like I did that video with the eggplant. You remember
that's
that,
right.
Nicholas, right?
Yeah.
You remember having to film me in the bathtub. You'll probably never forget that. I was wearing pants, but like sometimes you just have to do the thing that is you. And I am pretty shy and introverted, but I also like to perform.
Yeah.
And in my core, I am a used car salesman, and I just had to let it out. And it's like, because it was authentic, it was like, it was fun, and like a lot of people responded very well to it.
Exactly, it was fun, it was playful, it definitely stood out. You don't see that many startups deciding to do like a Billy Mays parody.
Not really.
Yeah,
But like that's like where other people have done things that are serious. I'm kind of goofy and weird, so that's just what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And my wife is not happy because she was kind of sick of living with that character, but that time is now past, and we all move on. So
yeah, exactly.
I think definitely like you were saying from Ashley Mythen, have fun. If you enjoy what you do, others will too.
Yeah.
Just like, misery loves company. You know what? Happiness loves company too.
Happiness loves... I always like that quote, misery loves company, but I've always tried to reword it because I just hate the idea of focusing on that. I'm always like, solidarity is nice. Something like that.
Yeah, so that's the kind of... Yeah, so we've kind of got through some of the ones in the general category. I think another big theme people wrote in was like, make sure to collaborate, right? Like,
yeah.
And that means not only collaborating with other podcasters, but also collaborating with local businesses, brands, and other organizations that might help you. Mm-hmm. The first one on that list, actually, from Kara Mayer Robinson of the Really Famous podcast, it just goes as Really Famous, was brand partnerships with an organization that, brand partnership with an organization that has a similar audience. Cross-promote by mentioning them in your podcast intro and ask them to spotlight you in their newsletter. So it's kind of like find an organization that has overlap with your podcast and then see if you can kind of trade ads almost. Like you talk about them and then they'll share you to their newsletter or whatever's appropriate. I think that's pretty smart because especially if your podcast is in a niche, which it probably is, being like kind of in that niche and interacting with the people in that niche, even if they're not podcasters, can be huge for growing your audience and even, leading to sponsorships and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. I actually think I saw something to that effect. I don't remember where. It might have been during Podcast Movement at one of the panels, but it was just the idea that finding people to listen to your podcast, a lot of people struggle to get people listening to podcasts in general. Mm-hmm. And the main problem is that they're going on Twitter and they're like hashtagging podcast and all these generic audio terms. And it's like people clicking on these hashtags usually aren't doing it because they're trying to find something to listen to. They're doing it because they're sharing something that they made. So the whole idea of doing something kind of lateral, working with an audience that you might already have, or just doing a brand partnership, it makes a lot more sense because you're getting people who aren't looking for a podcast. They're just looking for content. You know, I think people kind of overthink it, where it's like, we're not necessarily marketing a podcast. We're doing a show about some niche thing. So let's just find that audience, not just a podcaster.
Yeah, and that's true. It's another big kind of stat that came out really recently is that in the U.S. at least, only 1/3 of Americans have listened to a podcast in the past month. That means that 2/3 of Americans haven't, right? So it's like, that doesn't mean they don't want to listen to it. It most likely, I think it means they just haven't found the right thing yet. And I think people, like you're saying, they might not necessarily go out and find it, but if it's put right in front of them, they're going to listen to it and like it and subscribe and become fans of it. So it's definitely good. The brand stuff in the collaboration was big. The other thing was about working with other podcasters, and one of my favorite kind of succinct ones was from Nate Dufort of Unspookable. His quote was, advice was, show your fandom. We've had great success in amplifying the shows we love and having that favor return. So it's kind of, it seems natural. If you're a fan of something, just promote them, and then there's a good chance that the other show will kind of show you some love back.
Yeah, exactly. There's a really communal thing about podcasting in general. So it stands to reason that the more you engage with other podcasts, the more they're going to engage with you. And even just the way social media is structured. I mean, you can see what pages you follow on Instagram are liking. And that is a way you might find new pages or new shows. Likewise, Twitter literally tells you whenever someone likes a post. So if you have a podcast and you like posts by a similar podcast, first off, they're going to take a look at your profile, because I don't know about you, but I usually snoop when someone likes 2 or 3 things at once from me.
Yeah.
But also, his followers are going to be kind of pinged to the fact that he's taking a look at your profile.
Right.
And that's just going to grow your community.
Yeah, it's all about that's the social media, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly.
So the next kind of area, all about guests. So there's a lot of people wrote in about guests, because guests is a huge part of podcasts, is having guests on your show. And I think this is a really simple one, but it's also really kind of important to remember. It's from Desmore Samios from the Desmore Chats with Podcast, or the Desmore Chats with Podcast, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The Desmore Chats with Podcast. Either way, it's ask your podcast guests to promote their podcast episode with all their networks. It's so simple, but it's just remember to ask your guests to promote their podcast, to promote their episode. Be like, hey, you were on my episode. Can you share it out? I mean, there's a lot of other people have written in about things you can do to help by providing them. Where was it? Let me see.
I remember reading, someone said, just send them your headliner videos for the episode,
Yeah, someone said that. Where was it? Yeah, Phyllis Nichols wrote something. Phyllis Nichols of Sound Advice with Phyllis Nichols wrote, if you have guests on your podcast, doing a landing page for their episode. It's a little extra work, but if they have a large audience, it's worth it.
Yeah.
They'll promote it and you'll get lots of new listeners. So it's kind of going out there and making sure that you've interviewed this person, and then make it super easy for them to go promote it too, right? Provide them with what they need.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with the way social media is structured, if you're doing your half of it, if you're making a post, just a generic, a Facebook post, hey, I had such and such and such and such on my show, here's a 30-second segment from it. Just the act of posting that and tagging them is already putting that wheel in motion, because then they don't need to write a post necessarily. They can literally just reshare your Facebook post, or they can retweet your tweet, or if you're doing an IG story, they can repost it. And that's one click for them, That's not work.
Right. No, yeah, it's easy. It's just can you copy and paste this?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So another area people wrote about was consistency. I always for some reason, I kept thinking about fiber, whatever. So from Amanda and Shannon of the Pier 54 podcast, be consistent, release on the same day, same time. Fans rely on consistency. That's so true. I mean, as a huge podcast fan, a lot of podcasts I listen to come out every 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And when they don't come out, I'm always annoyed. I'm I'm either annoyed because I'm I really wanted to listen to it, or annoyed's the wrong word. I'm probably just disappointed, right? I'm not mad at them. I get it. speaking of consistency, we have a little consistency issues in our podcast because of my improper use of Google Calendar. But I'm usually disappointed if it's not there. That's like, I think for the podcaster, the fan that's disappointed is almost the best case, because what often happens is I just forget the podcast exists.
Yeah, you just kind of...
And then it doesn't come up and I'm like, oh, I don't know, I moved on to something else,
That's basically, that's what happened to me over the summer, actually, because I listened to 3 podcasts without fail every week.
Yeah.
If I Were You, which is Jake
Without
and
fail?
Amir's. Yeah, without fail, meaning like...
No, the
I
podcast
don't.
without
No,
fail?
no.
Oh.
I meant like without, like, I will actually listen to these every week. There is no way I'm missing them, kind of.
Gotcha.
The first one being
yeah, it's
If
a
I Were
Gimlet
You.
podcast without fail.
Oh, wow, I didn't even realize. There's a podcast for everything.
Sorry.
No,
There
it's
is.
fine.
You can't even say a string of... You can't say 2 words in the English language at this point and have it not be a podcast. I'm sorry. So Jake and Amir.
Yeah, so that's the one podcast. I listen to it every, like, Monday, kind of. They release on Mondays. If they don't release an episode for one reason or another, I literally don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
And then there's like other podcasts.
That was the day you shaved, probably.
Yeah, that was the day I came in just cleanly shaved, and you were like, what changed? And I was like, they didn't upload an episode.
You just grabbed a razor and started hacking away at your beard.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a facial hair Britney Spears moment. But
I actually was listening to a podcast about that the other day.
yeah, I saw something about
And
that
it's
actually.
wild. Yeah, that her security guards were like letting people film that, and
Wow.
she didn't realize it was happening. I don't know. Sorry.
But like exactly, like the lack of consistency in posting, especially on like something that's serialized or something long running where the habit's been built, where like someone knows, oh, Monday at 8 o'clock, there's a new episode. It is a weird way to break up the rhythm for your listener to not release something.
Because what happens is this, right? If you expect, like, I expect, I listen to Bill Burr's The Monday Morning Podcast.
Okay, yeah, that's a good show.
It's like, I like him. I'm from New England. I really appreciate the angry Boston thing he's doing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of home. But so what really happens is like, I don't think to myself, oh boy, Monday morning's coming along. Like, I hope this podcast is out. It's more like I get on the train, I put my earphones in, earphones, whatever they're called. And if it's not there, I'm just like, oh man, like I'm going to listen to like last week's whatever I already listened to.
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't actually ever do that.
Oh, I've done that.
You've done that?
Yeah, but
How did you do that?
in my case, so re-listening to episodes, the only show I do that for is Sam Jones. He's a photographer and director. He has a show called Off Camera. And every week he basically gets a different actor, musician, whoever, to just sit down and they just talk for an hour. So like it's kind of different because I'm going back, they're like talking about like method acting and like all of these topics, and I'm like, oh, I want to re-listen to this because I didn't fully understand it.
Right.
Or, whatever.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If you're trying to like Daniel Day-Lewis yourself.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm trying to become Daniel Day-Lewis, there's a good chance I need to listen to his interview 3 times.
And then how would you become a method actor?
First, you put yourself through a lot of torture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that usually helps. Second, you consider not doing that several times because I don't think it's actually worth it.
No, I mean, like, if you were method acting, how would you method act to become Daniel Day-Lewis?
Oh, how would I become Daniel?
Because you wouldn't be him in There Will Be Blood or Gangs of New York
you'd be
or
Daniel
My Left
Day-Lewis.
Foot or Last of the Mohicans or what's another great
Oh, what's that
DDL
last one he was
movie?
in from like 2 years? I don't remember.
his last one?
Yeah, it was his last
Was
one.
he ever Batman?
He should have been.
Oh my God, it would have been so good.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that was a stupid question. I
No, it's fine.
apologize.
But yeah, no. But like stuff like that makes sense. I don't know though. I think it's just the consistency is important.
It's also, I mean, this is like just this is like for life.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, that's just good advice.
if you're gonna like do something, just do it consistently.
Yeah.
Like for me, I consistently overeat every day to make sure I keep my weight up so I'm never cold. All right, so next section was not a lot about this, but a good number of people wrote about make sure your design and branding is good. One basic thing from Aaron Verart of Sugarfly, make a good thumbnail that catches people's attention while they browse through podcasts. And I think that's important because it's like when you think about your art, right? For your cover art, it's like people think about where people are going to be consuming them and what they're going to be doing. And it's like if the text is really small, for example, people won't be able to read it. So then what's the point? And it should stand out. It should be something where people look at it and they're like, "Oh, cool." It's just like album covers or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is also
like,
kind of no longer relevant.
I think it's relevant, but that's just me.
I know, but you're like a young person that like you have a insane knowledge of 70s, 80s, and 90s pop culture.
Yeah,
How old are
I get
you
that.
again?
I'm 24.
You know more about when I grew up than I do.
I've actually gotten that multiple times, and I just kind of shrug about it. I'm like, yeah, I know. I was probably born with a Billy Joel album in my hands. Like,
Yeah, you predate and postdate me.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's so true. Like, especially if you're going through the trouble to make custom artwork for every episode of your podcast, you may as well go the extra mile and really, like, you know, get some great art going for it. And it doesn't have to be completely original every time. Once you find a format that works, changing a few aspects of it every week is minimal work. It keeps you on brand, and it's still going to engage people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're not a good designer, go find someone on like Upwork or Fiverr, or ask your second cousin who took some summer classes in design, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so another category, kind of similar level of response to the design stuff, is about email. So I think email is one of those things that it's not new, it's not exciting, but it actually works. So I think email is a big thing to use. So one of my favorite quotes was from Tony Lloyd of Social Entrepreneur. Email still rules. It's easy to scroll past a social media post, but email requires action, either deleting or reading. With the right subject line and preview text, people open emails. With the right email with the right email copy, people take action. And I think that's so true.
Yeah, I totally see the value in a well-placed email, especially because, first off, again, I'm 24, so like me actually checking my email is a relatively new thing. You know, it happened within the last 5 years of like me actively actually caring about what's emailed to me.
Oh, okay.
Checking my personal email, I usually am just scrolling through things kind of passively, but if there's something, even though I know it might be an ad or it might be just promoting an episode of something, the right title, the right like preview text, that's going to grab me and that's going to make me actually read the full thing.
Right.
Even if I know there's a good chance I might not follow through, it could convert me.
Right.
That's kind of the point I was getting at.
Yeah, emails, it's interesting. I mean, email is just insane.
Yeah.
That it's used so heavily and it's not really, since it's not new, it's not as exciting, but I still think it's worth really figuring out your strategy there.
Yeah, it's definitely like an underrated, marketing move in 2019.
And so here we're getting into the largest section of feedback and advice we got was around social media. Mm-hmm. So I kind of split these up into general social advice and specific per platform. So it's like if it's specific to Facebook or YouTube, Instagram, whatever people are kind of talking about, I'd put that in one category and the other is just general. I think for the purpose of this discussion, we should just stick to the general advice, because otherwise it just is too much. Let me see.
Oh, here's a pretty good one. This is from Aiden, I'm going to butcher your last name, Vulacolo. Stories Behind the Grind is his podcast, and he basically says to repurpose your content by creating templates for Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. When you release a new episode, instead of posting on one platform, you'll have multiple to post on. Great advice. That kind of goes back to what I was saying about getting like your custom artwork templatized if you can. Mm-hmm. It minimizes the amount of work you're doing. It makes it a really easy habit to keep up on. And then you're getting content out that looks good. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a perfect win.
There's also, I noticed a lot of people, I mean, granted, this is people that for the most part are using Headliner. So a lot of people said make Headliner videos, make audiograms, make like video trailers, all this stuff. But one thing, there was a lot of people saying go broad, like make sure you're on all the platforms. And then other people saying, it's two ends of the spectrum. Caleb King from People in Tech saying master one social media platform and publish high quality content. And I think that kind of jibes with, I think from my perspective, I think it makes sense to start out with one platform, get good at it, get comfortable with it, and then move on to another one. And then get comfortable with that, and then you have multiple ones going. Another advice, though, when you're starting out, which I think is interesting, is from Terry Yuan of the Engendered podcast, is launch audiograms on different platforms simultaneously to test platform reach and effectiveness. So, when you're even the process of picking a platform, like say you want to do Twitter, say you're comfortable with Twitter because it's like what from like you did Twitter, you just think it's a fun platform. That's going to be good for you to start out with in some ways, but you might be missing out other platforms that could actually perform better for your audience, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people get great response right now from LinkedIn and Pinterest for promoting their podcasts, which are two kind of areas that I don't think have traditionally been thought about as the place to start. But it's definitely worth trying out different ones and testing and seeing what results you get.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, especially like with LinkedIn, because it is almost, on paper, it sounds almost unconventional depending on your show format. But the fact that it's somewhat unconventional means there's probably less competition there.
Yeah, totally. So another area that was a lot was about doing stuff in the real world, right? Like doing stuff. A lot of what we talk about is always in today's world is all about like, what are we doing online? What are we doing with social media, right?
Yeah.
But this is like real world. One of my favorite ones in the whole list, and maybe it's because I live near a farmer's market that's every Saturday, was from Rachel Wilkinson of Lifemancy. She says, attend farmers markets and other local vendor events. Find collaborative opportunities. You promote their wares while they introduce their customer to your show, i.e. cards on table, promoting you on their mailing list, etc. I think this is such a good idea. It's like it takes a little bit of work, and it might not work for your audience, but if it does, it's cool. Like I worked in a farmer's market for a few years at a fish in New York City at selling fish at like a fish stand.
Oh, okay.
And so like what we would kind of do is you'd get your stand, you could always buy like discounted fish, right? So you would buy some fish that you knew like a flounder or salmon or something that like other people want. Yeah. And you go around the market, and then instead of buying with the other vendors, you could actually trade it, right? Like you'd go to the cheese guy. I would go to the cheese guy. They'd be like, hey, I have a tuna steak over here. Like, what do you want to do? And then they'd like give me some like, chèvre or something.
Yeah, that's pretty old school. Like, hey, I'll give you these 2 salmons if you give me a live chicken.
Yeah. But I think like that kind of like, it's fun because it's like different than like what we're used to, but it's also like that kind of farmer's market thing is going on, right? So it's like if you're going with your podcast, and your podcast, especially if it makes sense for like, especially if it's like a food related podcast or like it has something to do with like, crafting or clothing or whatever's going on there, sustainability, all the things that seem to be at farmers markets, like there's a good chance that the people you meet there, the vendor is going to other farmers markets. They're not just going to one a week, most likely. Yeah. So they can get you in front of other audiences, and B, it's just kind of a fun way to connect. And you never know where your next listener is going to come from.
It's going back to that whole community thing. Like, it's just going up to other people. And the fact that you're doing it in person means you're actually like talking to this person and having a conversation about stuff. And like, I know a lot of people kind of are concerned that they'll just come off as really like annoying or begging, like they're begging for you to listen to the podcast or whatever, but I genuinely don't think that many people think of it like that. I mean, I was at the movies over the weekend, and I ended up having a conversation with a stranger who gave me his card for his theater troupe at the end of it. And I think that if I wasn't in a place where that kind of like, that was like community specific already, I probably would have shrugged and been like, cool, whatever. But I was actually kind of like, oh, this makes sense,
Right, because you're in the place that's like, it's like kind of like, you're also like in a theater, so it's like you like theater.
Yeah, exactly. Like it felt relevant, and it felt like we had a conversation first. He didn't just walk up to me on the street and go, hey, go see my theater troupe.
Right.
Although I'm a pushover, so I might have gone if he'd done that too.
So I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah, sure. I was on the way to the hospital to visit such and I'll go.
Another one for live stuff, leverage events. And this is from Jen Fisher and Amy Fields of the Work Well podcast. Leverage events. Whether you're attending a conference or hosting an event, use the opportunity to record podcasts on site with interesting attendees or event speakers. This is such a good idea, and it's something that, I mean, we've gone to a bunch of podcast conferences, and whenever we go, there's people doing just this. They're setting up their mobile kind of podcast, like what we're doing right now with a field recorder and 2 lav mics. They're doing stuff like that.
Exactly.
Setting up at a table and just recording people the whole weekend, and it's a great way to get out there, be seen, and get great content. So I think that's a huge idea. Another thing, Joni Deutsch from Amplifier says, my word of wisdom, it's word of mouth. It's one of the best ways to encourage podcast listenership. Encourage your listeners to recommend the podcast to their friends and family. I think this is huge. Like, word of mouth is actually still the number one way that people report having discovered podcasts. There's all kind of different takes of this, but it's definitely one of the largest ways that people find podcasts. I was having a lunch with a friend yesterday, and he recommended an awesome podcast that I had kind of heard of, but I'd heard of it, but I just hadn't checked it out. But it's the Broken Record podcast with Malcolm Gladwell and Rick Rubin.
Oh, okay.
And he was like, I was like, I hadn't checked it out because there's just like, by the time I learned about it, there was like a lot of episodes, and he's like, check out the Wildflowers one, the Tom Petty one. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I listened to that, and I was like, this is great. And so now I recommended it to someone else I know who likes Tom Petty.
You also just brought it up to me, and I'm a Tom Petty fan, so I know what I'm listening to.
I learned that Wildflowers was actually supposed to be a double album.
Okay.
And there's a whole other half of it that never got released.
That's insane.
It's just sitting there somewhere.
It's just somewhere at like the Warner Brothers vault.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So it's like, but that's the kind of stuff that's interesting, because then, sorry, where I was going back to is just ask your listeners to, like, people might not think, oh, I should share this with someone.
Yeah.
But if you just like remind them.
It doesn't cross their mind.
Yeah. Even if it's like, I do think it's like, if you say, hey, just, if you can listen, you could recommend us to your friends that might like it, that's great. Like, people will actually do it, because then when they see that friend, there'll be this little, like, breadcrumb in their brain that might trigger that says, like, oh, when the host told me to recommend this podcast to a friend, I thought of Jamie, and here's Jamie, so let me recommend this to Jamie. Like, otherwise they might not make all those connections, because people are busy, they're distracted, they have cell phones.
No, that's a really good point. And yeah, the whole word of mouth thing, it's just personal, Like, yeah, I can watch an Instagram clip from a podcast and I might check it out, but if someone actively tells me to, and I respect that person and their opinion, I'm way more likely to actually check the show out at that point. Or if they say something insightful, I think a lot of people forget that podcasts are information-based. So if you find something out on a podcast and you share it in your day-to-day life, there's a good chance that you're going to follow up with, oh yeah, I found that out on Song Exploder or something, So yeah, word of mouth, that's kind of classic.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's classic. And so next section, people said it was all about kind of interacting with your audience. And so I thought this one was kind of funny. It's from Mike Thomas of Inopsis. Know your audience. Like any hunter, know where they drink and feed, know their habits, what they are attracted to, what do they worry about, age, location, gender. Whether or not you really want to know where they drink and feed, probably not. But if you do think about it in terms of I really want to know this audience, who are they, what are they doing, what are they like? And once you know that, I think it'll help you a lot in terms of what you create and how you reach them.
Yeah.
Another one from actually the person that helped inspire this post, Jan Ilunga of the Podcaster Lab. When it comes to marketing your podcast, you should focus on 2 targets, your current listeners and potential listeners, meaning those that may know little or nothing about your podcast. I think that's super important to remember that, yes, people subscribe to your podcast. They have all the context of who you are. They've listened to 20 episodes. But you have to always remember that since those 2/3 of, in the US at least, and 2/3 of people haven't listened to a podcast in the past month, there's a good chance that someone brand new is going to come across this episode. And in that moment, you kind of have to hook them too. So you have to make sure that they kind of know what you're all about, and that this is a podcast for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I couldn't agree more.
The next section was kind of about things to do, make, or try. So One was I thought was a pretty good one from Suchandrika Chakrabarti of Freelance Pod. Enter Podcast Awards. Even if you're not nominated, the judges will now be aware of your work and have listened to some, and they tend to be influential people. So, like, enter awards even if you think you won't win, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll just be in front of the right people. Another one, Sean Tabbitt of the Sean Tabbitt Show. Do more video. I find the bulk of my new listeners, subscribers, find me via my solo and interview videos. I think that's huge. Obviously, we're here helping people make video. But it really is true that, like, the world is very visual in terms of the internet.
Yeah.
So you have to be visual to be found.
No, exactly. And that kind of goes back to just like the reason Headliner's even a thing. Like, podcasting is audio. You can't really share audio on social.
Right.
But you can share video. So you may as well turn your audio into video, or if you have native video, you may as well throw some captions on that or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. A few people wrote in about public relations. So Jesse from Castworks Industries Podcast Network wrote, feature a press kit on your website showing best clips, audience FAQs, contact info, guest list, etc. I think that's good. If you're writing about a subject that make it easy for a journalist to contact you and figure out what you're about. You might be surprised at what happens and where you get written up. Some people wrote in about, a number of people wrote in about search engine optimization. So one good piece of advice here, I mean, there's a bunch of, it's all good advice, but I like this one. In particular, Robin Good of DeBranda Friend is title your podcast posts as if they were articles or videos that need to rank inside Google. That's a whole nother search engine. Rank inside Google search results. Avoid journalistic and ironic titles in favor of those that synthesize in a few words the specific topic you are covering in your episode.
Yeah.
And then he writes, benefit, just like SEO, be increasingly found inside Google search engine page results as Google itself has upped its antennas for scouting new podcasts, suggesting them in the results and offering even a playback platform.
Yeah, exactly. And then building off of that, Lance Wantanar from Thinking Like a Genius, he basically says, if you can't transcribe your episodes due to cost, make sure you have a clear summary of your episode. This does two things. Allows for better SEO, makes your content searchable across Google and other search engines, and when your content is consistent with your topic, it increases page rank relevance distributed across social media. Building off of that, I think what's really good about having a really thorough show notes for your episode is you could put in supplementary information, which one, gives a lot of context to your viewers. You know, if they don't fully know the topic you're talking about, you can give them the crash course on that. Two, that's SEO right there. You're not just putting keywords in, you're actually just giving information off.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
What other ones do you see in there, Nicholas? In the next section. Do you want to take on the next section?
Well, I think, isn't SEO the last one?
Oh, it is.
It is.
Want more?
Oh man, I was just warming up, yeah.
Did we miss one? We missed one.
Did we?
I think go back to the things to do, make, or try. Mm-hmm. There are some other interesting things in there about like giveaways or...
Now, let's see. Things to do, make, or try. Oh, here's a good one. It is incredibly beneficial to include a picture of your guest in your audiograms and other social posts. We found that people seem more inclined to interact with the post if they can put a face to the voice. It's by Elijah Longwell from the Tuesday Night Podcast. It's night with a K in it. Yeah, I mean, that just makes a lot of sense. And I actually think I said this on an earlier episode of the podcast where just as people, we're kind of programmed to look at other faces and automatically relate to them. So if we're making posts and we have pictures of our guests, not only are we just marketing the fact that this person they've never seen before is on the show and they should check it out because that person's awesome, they also are just more drawn to the podcast in general because they're seeing a human face.
Right.
You know, and this is something that's backed up by like decades of psychological research.
Yeah. The human face.
The human face.
Humans are actually very good at distinguishing different faces. It's one of our superpowers that we don't even realize.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that's just kind of what makes us very unique anthropologically. Like we do see faces and we recognize minute expressions in them.
Right.
And putting that in your social post, just throwing a face there means that somebody is making that engagement with that face.
Cool. No, this has been good. So yeah, that's a roundup. Thanks to everyone who sent in their marketing tips. If anyone wants to go check out the full list, it's medium.com/headlinervideo. That's on medium.com/headlinervideo. You can find these tips there. And until next time. Or is there anything else we talk about here?
No, I think that's just about it for this week's Headliner podcast. Yeah.
Oh, there's one thing.
Oh, what is it?
Remember a couple podcasts ago, Bailey had asked about people sending her stuff to do.
Oh, yeah.
And it was suggested that she eat 100 hot wings. And so 2 weeks ago, we went up to a bar in the Upper East Side of Manhattan that has a 35 or I can't remember. It was like under 50 cents per wing.
Yeah.
And she made it through 30 wings.
Pretty impressive.
And then her entire body started swelling up from all the salt, and she looked like she was gonna be sick.
Oh no.
And so it stopped. But she made a video, and that's up on our YouTube. So YouTube, we're Headliner Video on YouTube.
Yeah,
We're Headliner Video.
youtube.com/headlinervideo.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can check that out. You could also check out the Chucky Wells video if you haven't already.
You don't need to check out the Chucky Wells video.
Oh, okay.
It'll check you out.
Oh, wow.
No, if you go to our YouTube right now, there's some really exciting things for you to look at.
Amazing. But yeah, that basically brings us to the end of this Headliner podcast, guys. So I think we have to take our own advice. If you enjoyed the show, if you got some value out of it, feel free to share it with, a friend, a loved one, a dog, that cranky person down the street from you, whoever, And yeah,
that's it, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. And we will be doing stickers again this year, so stay tuned for more on that.
All right, awesome.